I cannot believe that a number one businessman like you has fallen in love with his own fiancée. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode number 84 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about cabaret dancers. My name is Nathan Pottle, and thank you so much for joining me today. And today's episode, we're talking about performances. Now, the actor on screen, just appearing to us as that character, that is where the magic really happens when it comes to movies. If you can believe an actor as a character, then you can buy in to all kinds of crazy, ridiculous things within the story itself. And that's what I'm wanting to talk about today. Just because I was thinking last week about some of these specific performances that I'm going to mention today, and I was like, you know what, I haven't talked about this on the show yet. So here I am talking about my favorite performances. I have 5 here that I'm going to talk about, and actually, when I sat down to actually think about my top 5 favorite performances, there were some that immediately came to mind really fast, and then there were some that were really in contention for the top spots. I was thinking about a lot of different performances, a lot of different actors and actresses, and here I have my top 5, so I'm going to talk about them, I'm going to talk about the movies, but mostly I want to focus on the performance themselves and what about it is so convincing and so compelling. What is it about these 5 performances that for me outshine other ones that I've seen in the however many movies that I've seen and however many actors and how many performances? I don't even know. That number is probably really, really high, but I've narrowed it down to 5. So I'm going to start out with number 5 is Rosamund Pike as Amy Doon in Gone Girl. Now, Gone Girl was released in 2014 and is directed by David Fincher, and this movie is crazy. It's very dark and very serious, which is what I want to say right off the bat. This movie is not for the kids, not even a little bit. Basically, the plot is the main character is Ben Affleck, and his wife, who is played by Rosamund Pike, she goes missing, and they're trying to figure out what happened to her. Now, it's going to be really, really hard for me to talk about this performance specifically without mentioning spoilers, so I am going to go full spoilers for the movie Gone Girl. If you haven't seen it, I'm really sorry, but this performance is just absolutely chilling. Now, this performance, like every single one on my list here, was either nominated or won the Academy Award for the performance. I do believe this one was only a nomination. I don't remember exactly who won that year, but 2014 was the year that Birdman came out, so it might have been that. Or it might have been the girl from The Theory of Everything. What is her name? I want to say Alicia Vikander, but I know that it's not. It's the girl who's in Rogue One. I always get them confused. It doesn't matter, though. I'm talking about Rosamund Pike. Now, Gone Girl is based off of a novel, which I have not read, because I feel like the movie already made me kind of uncomfortable, but also I was so compelled by the story of this movie. And because I'm talking about spoilers now, let's just get right into it. Basically, this woman, Amy, she is kind of fed up with her husband and decides to leave, and she frames her murder and disappearance on him. And then some things happen, the story doesn't quite line up, she goes on the run, and then she meets up with an old friend in order to stay hiding out, but then she blames everything on the husband, but then she actually ends up killing the guy that she's staying with, and then goes back to her husband, and everything goes back to how it was. It's really interesting. And then by the end of the movie, she's claiming that she did all of these things, framing him for murder, killing someone. She's claiming that she did all of these things to save their marriage. And she says something that's really interesting at the end of the movie. She says, "I've killed for you. Who else can say that?" And by the end of this movie, she's just so out of her mind. But the entire performance that she conveys the character so well that I understand why she did all of the things that she did. Now, that's not to say that I necessarily agree with what she did or would have done the same in her position. I certainly would not. But she just takes everything to such extremes, and she's just such a cold person by the end of this movie. There's a really great opening and closing shot of this film with her laying next to Ben Affleck, and her head is resting on his chest, and the opening shot of the movie is her looking up towards the camera. The camera is from Ben Affleck's perspective, so she looks up at the camera to Ben Affleck, and then the final shot is that as well. It's the exact same shot, but something is very fundamentally different about the character from the beginning and the end of this movie. She just completely spiraled down into like darkness, I guess, is how I want to word it. I don't know exactly how I want to word it because it's such a good, compelling performance that I don't know exactly how to contain it or word it into these definitions. It just covers a wide range of things. And this is such a good performance, and I have such positive things to say about it that we can only get better from here because I still have 4 more to talk about. But really, Rosamund Pike knocked this out of the park. She swung for the fences and really went for it. And David Fincher, I think, is an extremely strong director, especially with the kinds of movies that he makes. So he really helped guide her as this character. He's done dark and disturbing pictures before. Primarily Seven, I think, is maybe his darkest. That movie's tough to watch. I don't know if you've seen Seven, but it's real dark. And normally that kind of thing necessarily isn't my favorite, but when it's done to this level of quality, I'm all in. Have you ever seen Silence of the Lambs? Silence of the Lambs is a real dark movie, but I'm all in on that film because it's just so compelling and good. And that movie has a good performance out of Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster as well. They didn't make the list, though, because I have some other ones that I liked a little bit better. I'm going to wrap that up on number 5, though, which is Rosamund Pike as Amy Dunn in Gone Girl. My number 4 pick is probably a lot of people's number 1, and I can 100% understand why someone would put this as their top favorite performance of all time, and that is Heath Ledger as the Joker in The Dark Knight, which came out in 2008 and is directed by Christopher Nolan. This movie it just breaks the barriers of what a superhero movie could be, because up until this point we've had the X-Men movies and Blade and the Spider-Man trilogy, and that kind of defined what we could get out of a superhero movie. And then Batman Begins comes along, and it's a little more serious, a little more real world. And then The Dark Knight comes along and just blasts Batman Begins out of the water, which is a shame, because I think Batman Begins is a really strong movie that gets overshadowed by The Dark Knight. And then, unfortunately, The Dark Knight Rises comes along, and it's just not very good at all. And that could be because The Dark Knight is so good that it could only pale in comparison. I guess that could be, and I've revisited The Dark Knight Rises a couple times and have tried to watch it and try to enjoy it, and I just really don't. But The Dark Knight, with Heath Ledger as the focal point of this film, he is the driving force. He is an agent of chaos, and every moment that he's on screen, I just drink in, because he just was the Joker. And a very specific iteration of the Joker as well. We've seen a lot of different versions of the Joker. We've had the Cesar Romero Joker from Batman 66. We've had Jack Nicholson as the Joker. We've had Heath Ledger. We've had Jared Leto as the Joker. And then most recently we've had Joaquin Phoenix, who also won the Academy Award for his performance as well. I don't really like Joker as a movie very much, so that's why I picked Heath Ledger, because I think it's a better performance. I think it's a better movie overall. And really, this is like a cop drama, this movie. It's really just a villain and a hero who happen to dress up like a bat and a Joker, a jester. I don't really know what to describe what the Joker dresses up as. A clown. Why? Yes, the Joker dresses up like a clown. That was very foolish of me. But oh well. Getting back to Heath Ledger, he really committed to this performance, and he was 100% in. What I really like about it is that when it was announced that he was playing the Joker, that there was a lot of negative feedback and a lot of fans who were not happy with the choice. And now, looking back 12 years later, there's a lot of fans that anytime that the Joker comes up in something else, that they're like, no, Heath Ledger will be the Joker forever and nothing can replace Heath Ledger because he's the greatest. And I agree, Heath Ledger is very, very good as the Joker. It's an amazing performance. He just so embodies the element of chaos, and he even said that in the film, that he's an agent of chaos. he will just go off and do whatever he wants without any kind of plan, and that's how he wins. There's no pattern. He doesn't want money. He doesn't want power. He just wants to see the world burn, and we really see that from his character. We also see from him that he really likes Batman and has kind of designated Batman as his own personal plaything and toys with him and like leads him along on this string of investigations and really hard moral choices. We just get so much depth from a character who has zero story arc. From the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie, the Joker's exactly the same, but he's such a driving force. He's such a hurricane that blows through Batman's life that it's like watching a train wreck or a car crash, and you know what's happening is awful, but you can't look away. You're just so compelled. And I think that's probably the best word to describe this performance is compelling. I don't think the Joker gets tons and tons of screen time. It's a 2.5 hour movie, and it mostly focuses on Bruce Wayne like coming to terms with all of the things that he's done. But when the Joker's on screen, he is in charge. He walks into a room and he is a commanding presence. And speaking of commanding presence, I'm going to be using that term again later on as we keep getting into these performances in my top 3. But the Joker specifically, he's a driving force and a commanding personality in a very different way than some of these other performances, just because of his nature and his particular goals are so chaotic. He just wants chaos. That's all that he wants. And it seems from his point of view that it is very easy to get what he wants in order to like pit people against each other and give Batman these tough decisions to make and blow people up or poison people and give these absurd clues. It's just insane. And then tragically, Heath Ledger passed away after the filming of this film and won the Academy Award posthumously. I do believe it was his daughter who accepted the award for him at the Academy Awards that year. I don't remember 100%, but it's a sad thing. And you can come up with all kinds of reasons as to why Heath Ledger is no longer with us. Like, did he go too deep into the Joker, a part of his role, and just like couldn't climb back out, or what happened? We probably won't know. We, as in the general audience, that's for the families. That's way too personal. We don't need to know the reasons that Heath Ledger is no longer with us. All we need to know is that he gave a magnificent performance as the Joker, and that legacy of his will live on for many, many years to come. People are going to be talking about this performance for a long time. Now, speaking of talking about a performance for a really long time, that leads me into my number 3, because this one is the oldest on my list, and that is going to be Audrey Hepburn as Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's. Breakfast at Tiffany's came out in 1961 and is directed by Blake Edwards, and this movie, it's definitely the lightest of the 5 movies on this list here. It is serious, it's a drama, but it's also lighthearted in moments. It knows when to pull back. It knows when to have fun, even with the heavy subject matter that it has. And what I find most interesting about Holly Golightly as a character, out of all of these 5 performances that I'm talking about today, Holly Golightly is probably the most relatable. She's the most real person that we can put ourselves in her shoes and see things from her point of view and 100% understand, and maybe we would do things the same way as her given the same set of circumstances. Some of the things that happened to her in her life are absolutely tragic. Some things are tragic perhaps only from her point of view, and because certain things that happened to her in her life, she doesn't like to get attached. She doesn't like to form attachments. Even the cat that she hangs out with, she only just calls cat, because if you give it a name, you become more attached, and when the cat decides to leave you, it's just gone. They're gone. She just kind of floats from group of people to group of people. She likes enjoying eating her breakfast in front of Tiffany's. She likes to sing songs. She likes to have fun. And oh my goodness, she's just such a sweetheart to watch. and we feel bad for her, and we sympathize with her, and we love her, and she's just conveying all of these different things to us throughout her performance. Audrey Hepburn is one of my favorite performers of all time. She's way up there on the list just because everything that she does is always so good. I also really like her in the movie Sabrina. That might be the one of hers that I've seen the most. She's also really, really good in My Fair Lady, which I don't remember when My Fair Lady came out, but it's pretty good, and it's been a while since I've watched it, so I should probably revisit it. If you haven't seen Breakfast at Tiffany's, basically the story is there's this young man who moves into an apartment building whose neighbor is Holly Golightly, and they meet each other and they interact and they form this friendship, but then mysteries from her past start to come to light and he learns more about her, and things happen. And I don't want to really ruin it because I feel I can talk about her performance without giving away the story, so you can find out what happens to Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's. I definitely recommend that you watch it. I'm pretty sure it was in my list of 100 must-watch movies for movie buffs when I did those back in April. Pretty sure it was on that list. If it wasn't, it should have been, because it is fantastic. And the whole reason that this movie is fantastic is largely due to Audrey Hepburn. She was a huge star in the 1960s. She was very, very famous, and with good reason, because she was great. She was beautiful, she was talented, and we could just watch her on screen all day. I say we as if I were there in the 1960s. I really wasn't. I wasn't born until the early 90s, but you get what I mean. She's such a presence, and all of these actors are such a presence on screen. They have this charisma to them. We love them, we sympathize with them, we hate them, we can't stop watching them. And anytime that there's a scene with them or something interesting happening, we're just glued to the screen. We are so thoroughly engaged by these actors and these performances. And Holly Golightly specifically, because she's so relatable, we're able to see what she's been through, and maybe we've experienced some of the same things in her life, or maybe we feel the same way about certain things, about making friendships, or like not forming attachments, having trust issues. These are the things that many, many people struggle with and understand. And I think that that's a huge part of why Audrey Hepburn's performance of Holly Golightly is one of the best of all time, and it's my number 3 favorite. I'm going to move on to my number 2, though. This is another one that is probably a lot of people's number 1, but it's my number 2, and that is Marlon Brando as Don Vito Corleone, also known as The Godfather. Now, The Godfather came out in 1972, it's directed by Francis Ford Coppola, and oh my goodness, The Godfather is just a magnificent, magnificent film. Generally, when people talk about the greatest movies of all time, The Godfather is generally in that discussion. It's usually between The Godfather or Citizen Kane. For myself, it's The Lord of the Rings, but that's a whole other conversation about best movies of all time. Very subjective conversation, I'll add, mind you. But going back to The Godfather is such an impactful film. It has led the way for filmmakers like Martin Scorsese to make all of his gangster films. It is the gangster film. It is basically that's the defining statement. The Godfather is the gangster film. I don't think there are any that are better than it. Maybe The Godfather Part 2. It's pretty good as well, but I like this original one. Just, it's about this family. And Marlon Brando's character, Don Vito, he really doesn't get tons of screen time. He is listed as the main character who won the Academy Award for Best Performance in a Leading Role, not in a supporting role, even though I think Al Pacino gets either just as much screen time as him or maybe more. I can't remember 100%, but Al Pacino's performance is not as good. Don't get me wrong. Al Pacino is very good in The Godfather, but he is not Marlon Brando good. Marlon Brando is such an actor, and I use the word actor in the classical sense that he's so committed to his roles. He had like little things made to put into his jaw to make his mouth look different. He gave this voice, and Marlon Brando just has this presence. My wife and I rewatched Guys and Dolls the other day, and that's with a young Marlon Brando. Now, I don't think he's a spectacular singer, but when he had acting to do, he was acting. And it wasn't over the top and dramatic. He's not Nicolas Cage, he's Marlon Brando. He is serious and takes his craft seriously, and this is a man who is methodical and thinks. And the Godfather himself is a character who is both reasonable and ruthless. He is authoritative. He is a figure that when he walks into the room, he is definitely in charge. Even more so than when the Joker walks into the room. If these two guys were in a room together, the Don is in charge, not the Joker. Marlon Brando, he listens and he observes and then he strikes. Like, there's a very famous scene where in the very opening film of the movie, a guy comes to him asking for help, a young actor who wants to be in a movie, and the Don, the Godfather, he says, "I'll take care of it. I'll give him an offer he can't refuse." And what is that offer he can't refuse? He goes to the director of the movie, he offers, says, "Hey, put him in the movie." Director refuses, and then, because the director refuses, the Don went and had the director's famous prized horse's head chopped off and stuck into the director's bed. And the director wakes up and he finds the horse head, and this is a very famous scene of the actor waking up and discovering this severed horse head in his bed, and he's screaming and freaking out. And that's who the Godfather is. He is reasonable, but if you cross him, it's all over. And that is evident from the very opening scene of this movie, where we see him sitting and he's petting his cat, and this young man is sitting there talking to him. He's asking for a favor, and when the actor is freaking out, the Godfather stands up and he slaps him. He says, "What's the matter with you?" And he goes off on this rant of crying when you should be acting like a man. And the Godfather, he's a man's man. He is in charge. He is tough, and he's interesting, right? I like people who are interesting, and I can follow their journeys. Now, the Godfather itself, it's more about the mantle being passed from father to son, because the Don is getting ready to retire from the family business, so he's preparing his son to take his place. But then things happen, and he has another son who doesn't really want to be as involved, but he's coaching and helping, and he loves his family, and it's just, the Godfather is so good. My wife doesn't like it as much, but I can understand why some people might not like it, but I don't think anyone can watch this movie and say this is a bad movie. I think most people would say, okay, this is a very well-made film, but it's not really my thing. I'm not as into it. And I can understand that, and I can respect that. But it's especially important that Marlon Brando gave a career-defining performance in this film along a long line of defining performances. Marlon Brando is just magnificent. We don't get a lot of actors like him anymore who are just so dedicated to the craft, except for one. We have one actor who surpasses Marlon Brando in all things. My favorite actor of all time, he is my number one, and that, of course, is Daniel Day-Lewis as Daniel Plainview in 2007's There Will Be Blood. Now, There Will Be Blood is directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, and this, for a long time, this was in my top 10 favorite movies. I've recently moved it out, just because it's a movie I really have to be in the mood to watch, because it's so serious. And this is largely, in fact, due to the subject matter of the story. It's about this man, Daniel Plainview, and he wants to be an oil tycoon, the best in the business, and he is on the hunt for oil, and he comes along this small town who is not really wanting to go and give the land that they need to get this oil, and Daniel Day-Lewis kind of goes head to head with the local preacher, and they're at war with each other. And that's the story of, we get oil and money and greed and religion and all of these different things poured into this film. And for the exact same reason that all of these other 4 previous performances were fascinating to watch. Rosamund Pike was chilling. Heath Ledger was compelling to watch. Audrey Hepburn, we were able to relate to her. Marlon Brando was authoritative and ruthless, and Daniel Plainview is all of these rolled into one. And there's so much going on in Daniel Day-Lewis's performance that I could rewatch this movie 10, 20, 30 times and still notice new things. Facial tics, features, the way that he moves, the way that he looks, the way that he breathes. Everything that Daniel Day-Lewis does is not Daniel Day-Lewis, it's Daniel Plainview. When he is in character, he is in character. And like Robert Downey Jr. says in Tropic Thunder, I don't break character till the DVD commentary. And I think that this meant to be kind of a play on Daniel Day-Lewis and how method of an actor he is, because of every performer that I've seen in my entire life. I've never seen anyone who is as committed to their roles as Daniel Day-Lewis. Everything that he's in. When he plays Abraham Lincoln, he's Abraham Lincoln. When he's Daniel Plainview, he's Daniel Plainview. When he's the Butcher in Gangs of New York, he's the Butcher. Bill the Butcher is that character's name. He's really great in The Last of the Mohicans. He's great in The Name of the Father. He's great in Phantom Thread. He's great in everything because he takes his craft so seriously, and he takes the time to research his character, to get to know his character, to be in that mindset, so that when it's time for Daniel Plainview to go off on a rant and drink someone's milkshake, or when it's time for him to fall down a well and break his leg, or when it's time for him to instruct his son that he has adopted, all of these things are just on screen in front of us. And there's not a moment that Daniel Plainview is not Daniel Plainview, and that I'm not 100% convinced that I'm just watching a character in a story that I'm fascinated by. I absolutely love this performance. It is so compelling, and we can relate to him on a level because he wants to be the best, and who doesn't want to be the best? But then he takes it one step further. Not only does he want to be the best, he wants other people to not succeed. Now, I'm really happy when other people succeed. I get happy for other people, but that's not how Daniel Plainview sees it. If other people are succeeding, that means that he's not. And so he needs to do what he can to be the number one top dog in the oil business, and he's going to do what he can in order to stay that way. And like the title suggests, there will be blood if you cross him, because he is ruthless. He is as ruthless as The Godfather, as relatable as Holly Golightly, as compelling as the Joker, and as chilling as Rosamund Pike in Gone Girl. There's so much going on within this performance. It's so layered, it's so deep. If you haven't seen There Will Be Blood, please check it out. I will let you know, though, going in, it is a slow burn of a film, and there are long stretches where things are building and building and building, and there's this pressure and there's this tension, but then when things go off, when things happen, they're big. And oh my goodness, I just love every moment of it. Daniel Day-Lewis is my favorite actor of all time. I think he is the best. Someone will have to come along and be really, really good in order to unseat Daniel Day-Lewis for me as my favorite. And Daniel Plainview is my favorite of his performances. He has since retired. Phantom Thread was his last movie, so I won't be watching any new Daniel Day-Lewis movies, so I have cemented it in time as Daniel Plainview being my favorite performance of Daniel Day-Lewis's. So that is gonna be it for today's episode. Those are my 5 best performances. I'll run through them one more time. Even though I've repeated them a lot, I'll do it just for kicks. Number 5 was Rosamund Pike as Amy Dunn in Gone Girl. Number 4 was Heath Ledger as the Joker in The Dark Knight. Number 3, Audrey Hepburn as Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's. Number 2, Marlon Brando as Don Vito Corleone in The Godfather. And number 1, Daniel Day-Lewis as Daniel Plainview in There Will Be Blood. That's going to be it. So what I'm going to do now is turn over the question to you, the audience. What is your favorite performance in a movie that you have ever seen? I would love to know what your favorites are. Please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter at Pottle Nathan. You can find the show on Instagram at Movies Are Awesome Podcast. And you can email the show at moviesareawesomepod@gmail.com. All that information is in the show notes below. If you like the show and you haven't done so already, please feel free to subscribe to it. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and a whole bunch of other places. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Really means a lot to me. I like talking about things like this, really getting into the nitty-gritty of a character. Maybe one day I'll dedicate an entire episode just to Daniel Plainview. I'll rewatch There Will Be Blood. If that's something you're interested in watching, let me know. But for now, I'm just going to stick to doing things like this. I've got a movie review lined up for next week, so stay tuned for that. And as always, if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.